Hi folks, it's Mark White here again, and welcome to what might be my final vlog on EVs for quite a while. Over the last 6 months we've been documenting our journey from selling one of our combustion engine cars through to research into buying an EV, setting up home charging, smart meters, energy tariffs, to ultimately owning our first EV and just sharing our experiences along the way. Now overall our experience has been very positive, albeit with a few hiccups, and I'm pretty sure that when we sell our remaining petrol car that we're going to replace it with another EV and go fully electric. But throughout all of this it's really made me think in detail about the bigger picture of going electric for the country as a whole. Now first of all, let's just start about how we fund the roads in this country. We were lucky to get a £3,000 government grant towards buying our EV. We also had a grant towards our charger, and we don't pay road tax anymore. So, instantly there's a lot of costs associated with that we're not contributing and actually taking from the system. We also mainly use our EV now, where it's so cheap to run that we hardly use the petrol car. It's only really used when both of us need a car at the same time. And that's meant that we actually have only put fuel in it twice since December. Now that means I'm not contributing to the tax system in this country really in fuel duty. I'm just taking money out at the moment in the form of grants, which, okay, it isn't a bad thing for me personally, but if you add this to everybody else who's buying an EV at the moment and doing similar things, and then the tax incentives for going hybrid or electric for company vehicles, then you can see there's a bit of a looming problem here on the horizon. Now, obviously the government has started to try and address this. They've recently reduced the amount of the grant to £2,500. Also, they've reduced the value of the cars that this applies to, so you can't get this grant on more expensive cars now. And that makes sense. The more people buy EVs, the less money there is in the pot to pay out in grants. The other thing, of course, which is probably a benefit to this, is hopefully it might force manufacturers to reduce the cost of EVs. If you can get your EV under the limit to entitle it for a grant, not only is it going to make the car more saleable because it's cheaper, but also with the grant knocked off as well, it's going to be cheaper still. And I think that could have an impact on EV prices. Again, could be a good move for the cars, but also it's obviously going to benefit the tax burden for this country if you're not paying out quite so much in grants. But take all of this into account, it still doesn't explain how new roads and how road repairs are going to get funded going forward. I think it's inevitable that the road fund licence will need to be added back to EVs at some point. But fuel duty to the revenue is much higher than just vehicle tax. And at the moment there's no way to collect that from an EV owner. You can't increase VAT on electricity without penalising non-car owners, so I can't say that you could do it that way. And certainly at the moment there's no technology in the cars that would allow us to pay on a per mile basis. Maybe it's an annual audit on cars which then tells you how many miles you've done in a year, and then you pay retrospective tax based on your usage. I don't know, who knows. The next issue is also the 2030 deadline for stopping the manufacture of combustion engine cars. Now I applaud this. I mean, I think that getting rid of fossil fuel vehicles and pollution and all those sorts of things is great. And I think it's ambitious that we've got a target like this. But again, there's a question about how this gets achieved. The car manufacturers, I think, have risen to the challenge. And I think admittedly that's through being scared witless by new kids on the block like Tesla. But you are really now spoiled for choice as to who to buy an EV from. Also, many of them have now announced a date for when they're going to stop production of combustion engine cars, and some of those have brought that forward, and they're actually going to stop producing combustion engine cars before 2030. So I think from a car buying point of view, this does actually look achievable. The issue is when you look at the charging infrastructure. Now, we're lucky. We have a drive and a garage, so we've got a charger installed at home, I get home, I plug it in, I set the timer, and we charge it overnight on cheap renewable energy. So for us, it's a no-brainer. But if we look at where we live, you can start to see some of the problems. So we live in a village called Whittington, which is in Staffordshire, just outside Lichfield. And as you drive around the village, we've got a wide variety of houses and properties. We have very large houses with drives and gardens and garages, but we have flats, we have apartments, we have cottages that don't have any parking outside of their property. We have older terrace-based properties that are straight onto the pavement, and people park outside their homes but no drive as such. So, you know, and then you get to Lichfield, and in Lichfield there are a few high-rise tower blocks. So where are folks going to go to charge their cars? I mean, I just don't get it, and I can't see how that's going to be done. Now, if we look at public chargers in the area, so if we look at ZapMap, for instance, we can see several blue icons. These are slow 7 kilowatt chargers like we've got at home, and to fully charge your car, that's going to require overnight charging. So, and if you look at them even closer, a couple of them have got house symbols on them. There's chargers that are on people's homes that they've opened up and made them available to the public. They're not really generally available chargers. Others, like the blue one at Tesco's, that has a time limit on it, so people can charge while they're doing their shopping. Again, it's not really suitable for an overnight charge. The yellow one that's on the map, that is a restricted access charger at a hotel, which is just for guests. So there's very, very few options. And when you look closer, the only fast charger is the pink one, which is at Waitrose, and it doesn't work. One of my earlier videos covered this, and this is where Waitrose have got no intention of getting BP Pulse to fix this charger. So actually we've got no fast charging in the area at all. And that completely excludes residents without a drive from owning an electric vehicle. Now, the other side of this, of course, is that's the local charging problem, but then you've got the nationwide charging infrastructure for long distance travel. Now that is getting better. It's still far from ideal, as we found on our last road trip video, for any of you who've watched those. So how do we fix that? Well, one opinion is that petrol stations will start to replace their pumps with chargers, and maybe that will happen as petrol revenues decline. I should imagine they're already starting to get hit by the number of people who are buying EVs and not going to petrol stations anymore. But then the question is, do people want to drive to a petrol station and then sit there for a period of time while they wait for their cars to charge a couple of times a week? I'm not sure people do. There are destination charging stations like GridServe at Braintree in Essex. This one's pretty impressive, to be honest. It offers renewable energy. It's got shops, a cafe, it's got gyms, but we need thousands of these. These need to be dotted all over the country, so everybody's got one locally within a few miles of home for it to be practical. I'm lucky. I work for a forward-thinking company who recently invested in an on-site multi-storey car park for employees, and they've installed chargers as well for their employees to use too. Maybe that's an approach, but of course not all businesses can do this. But I think that's something that most businesses should be looking at. My wife works for an organisation in Staffordshire. They have an office in Hull. If she drives to the office in Hull, she can't get there and back on a charge. But if they installed chargers at work, so she could drive there, plug in, charge while she's at work during the day, and then have enough to get home, then that would work. But that requires businesses to make an investment in the charging infrastructure as well. Now, for me, the only other option is a countrywide infrastructure of on-street chargers in every town and village. And to be honest, I didn't think this was anything that would be possible. I couldn't say how you could do this until a couple of weeks ago. We decided to go to Kenilworth Castle for the day, and our sat-nav took us through Coventry. And as we're driving through Coventry, on the sat-nav, it just lit up like a Christmas tree with chargers everywhere. It's the first time I've seen so many charge points appearing on the sat-nav. Now, we weren't able to stop and investigate, because we'd got time tickets for Kenilworth Castle. But when we got home, we did some further investigation, and basically what it revealed is a network of bollard and lamppost chargers which are supplied by a company called ChargeEY, and that's been done in conjunction with Coventry Council. Now that for me is just genius. I know they're only 3 kilowatt hour chargers, and that means they're quite slow, but if there's enough of them in a town or a village that people can come home from work and plug in and leave them charged overnight, that'd be fantastic. Now admittedly, it's a little bit more expensive than my home charging at 5p a kilowatt hour that I'm paying for with Octopus Energy at the moment, but it does mean that local charging is available regardless of the type of property you own. Likewise, if I'm travelling on business or travelling for a holiday, if those sorts of chargers were about all over the country, I wouldn't have any range anxiety or anything like that about where I'm going to charge, because I know there would be chargers somewhere nearby that I could use if need be. I suppose another thought is, if this is something that the government could invest in, maybe this is a way for the government to earn tax revenue. Maybe this could replace fuel duty. I know none of us want to pay more tax, but we've got to be realistic that roads have to be paid for, and maybe government-sponsored charging network could cap the rates to a sensible level to make it affordable, but still make a profit as well. So there's a thought. But then another random thought is, why aren't new houses being built with chargers already installed as standard? My daughter is an architectural technician for a major UK house builder. They're switching to timber frame construction at the moment for all the insulation benefits that brings. They're also moving to ground source heat pumps to replace gas boilers, yet the houses aren't supplied with an EV car charger as standard. That means that homeowners have now got to retrofit a charger after they move in. Now, if planning regulations decreed that all the new homes need to have a charger, then that would encourage the shift to EVs. The cost to install these during construction is much less than having to retrofit them later, and also the fact that it wouldn't need to be paid for by a government grant. Again, that's going to save the government money, so why wouldn't you do that? And then surely, if I moved into a new house and there was a charge point on the wall in my new house, when I come to charge my car, to change my car, I would probably be more encouraged to go and look at an EV than buying another petrol car if I knew all my charging infrastructure was already in place. For me, that just seems a no-brainer from a grant point of view, and also an encouraging people to move to EVs point of view. I just don't see why that's not been done already. So I know the government have had a lot more to worry about in the last 18 months than where people charge their vehicles, but hopefully as we leave the pandemic behind and get back to normality, then we need to consider these challenges. It's only 8.5 years away until we stop selling combustion engine vehicles, and without fixing the charging infrastructure, so folks don't need to have that done, then what you're going to find is people who haven't got a drive at home, they're going to be restricted to buying second-hand vehicles. They're not going to be able to buy a new car. They're only going to be able to buy a car that somebody with a drive has sold because they've just bought an EV. And that's really not fair. I mean, we've got to find a way to help people who don't have the ability to charge at home while the rest of us switch to electric. We've got to find a way to doing that. Now, just really for an FYI, I'm going to send a link to this video to our local Member of Parliament, Michael Fabricant. It's going to be interesting to see if he watches it and if he comes back and has any thoughts. But it's all stuff that I think that needs to be considered by the government and also by local councils. I'm okay, I can charge at home, but the Lichfield area has no capability for car owners without a drive, or business travellers coming into the city, or tourists coming into the city to fast charge their cars while they're here. in my last video, you'll see that we stayed in Harrogate recently, and their council installed fast chargers at their council offices for everyone to use. It was a major factor in us choosing Harrogate as a base for our trip to the Yorkshire Dales. We've got no incentive in Lichfield to encourage people into the area, and also to encourage the constituents of the city to switch to an EV. So again, it'll be interesting to see what our local MP has to say on that matter. Anyway, time to wrap up. I just want to thank everybody who's watched this and my other videos in the series. I know from your feedback that the information I've shared with you has helped many people with their journeys to going electric. Likewise, I've learned quite a lot of stuff from you guys as well, because you've shared some great information with me, and I've picked up all sorts of nugget of information in your comments. At the moment, I've got no more plans to do any more videos on this subject. I think I've exhausted it at the moment. I'm not ruling out I'll have to do another one when I've got something worth sharing. But until then, thanks for watching. And hopefully I'll be returning to posting my live music videos, which is what I used to do on this channel before lockdown. So hopefully, we can get back to life as normal. I can start going to gigs and posting music videos again. And you guys can get on with buying an EV and going electric like we did. Thank you ever so much.